You are watching ABN.
The issue on whether women have equality of rights with men in Islam is a matter being debated around the country today. Some scholars say that Islam guarantees women do have equality of rights, while other scholars say the contrary. Which should we accept? Thank you for joining us this evening on Debate Night on ABN Live. I'm Chris Conway, your moderator of the evening. We have two experts debating this motion. Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. I'm honored to introduce Moustafa Zayed, who will argue on the affirmative of the motion. Moustafa Zayed is a member of the Scientific Board of Quran and Sunnah Research in Cairo. He speaks widely in interfaith settings with a devotion to bridging peace between major religions and communities. Zayed is author of several books, including The Lies About Muhammad. I'm also honored to introduce to you Robert Spencer, who will argue on the negative of the motion. Robert Spencer is the director of Jihad Watch, an organization dedicated to bringing public attention to the role that jihad theology and ideology plays in the modern world, and to correcting popular misconceptions about the role of jihad and religion in modern-day conflicts. He is the author of 10 books, including the New York Times bestsellers, The Truth About Muhammad, and The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades. We will hear from each of the debaters an opening statement, rebuttals, crossfire, and a closing statement. I'll notify each of the debaters when there are 30 seconds left on the clock. We will then conclude the formal part of the debate and open the phone lines for you, the audience, to call in. The number here at the studio is 248-416-1300. Again, the motion of tonight's debate is Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to you, Moustafa, for your opening statement. You have 7 minutes.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil khalqi ashrafil mursaleen. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Before we speak about the specificity of the topic of women's rights in Islam, in generality, dealing with any human being in Islam is included in Islamic law or Sharia law. Sharia law is not a law that is made by the limited comprehension of men at a certain period of time in a certain geographical area and then trying to impose that upon all humans worldwide in any time. This is the law of God. And God is just, and He forbade injustice upon Himself in any topic, and forbade it for His worshippers and creations. So when we say women's rights in Islam, we need to understand that it is the law of God protecting and making sure that women and men are having their perspective in equal rights in every aspect of life. Two things before we get into the rights of women in Islam and their position in Islam. The first thing is that in Islam, men and women are not in competition. They're not roommates competing for who pays a bigger or smaller portion of the bill of, splitting whatever cost somewhere. They are to complement each other. They're different in physiology, they're different in emotional structure, and Islamic law came that they enjoy the best of their life according to their own structure, in needing each other, in depending on each other, in completing each other, complementing each other. That's number one. Number two, specifically when it comes to the rights of women, a woman, the female in Islam, is your potential mother. And it's not that females are half of humanity and then they deserve rights and so on and so forth. No, females are the mothers of the next generation who are to shape and sculpture the character of all men and women, the entire next generation to come. So Islam and Islamic law made sure to guarantee their protection, their financial sustenance, their stability, so they can perform the best and the most decent job that a human being can do, which is, again, raising the next generation. When you took a position, I would say, hopefully objective position, in looking at the condition of women and their rights and obligations before Islam and after Islam, the difference couldn't be more stark. It's the difference between a day and a nightmare. Before Islam, for example, in parts of India, according to Hinduism, a woman was to be burned alive if her husband passed away. She's just there for him. He dies, there's no need for her existence. As a matter of fact, in other places, when they got some progression, she's not even supposed to get married again. Little newborn babies were buried alive. The horrendous mistranslation in the Bible about the concept of original sin, that it is through our mother Eve, our father Adam was deceived out of paradise into earth. When Islam comes in, all that was rectified, and our mothers, our daughters, our sisters were relieved when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran said, فَأَزَلَّهُمَ الشَّيْطَانُ عَنْهَا. It is the devil that deceived them both out of paradise into earth. Women had now inheritance rights that in America today, women do not have. Guaranteed inheritance rights. Women have equal pay rights. They have the right to own, to speak their mind, to debate, to run businesses. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, only wife for a quarter century, Khadija, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with her, was a businesswoman. In England till 1882, the end of the 19th century, a woman did not have any right to own a property in her own name. It has to be the brother, the husband, or the son. She could not even stand in court as a legal entity. At the end of 19th century, that right was mandated to, given to Muslim women in the 7th century. So it's not even equal to or similar to or better to. No, that was better rights in the 7th century. Islam mandated the education of women in the middle of 7th century. In a correct hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, even for a war captive that is now entrusted to a Muslim man, that he, even though she's not a Muslim, he needs to treat her well and educate her. And the authentic hadith is there. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would release a war combatant that might turn around and come and kill Muslims if he taught Muslim men how to read and write, and the similar thing for Muslim women, how to read and write. A woman is not an object of desire anymore, is not a vessel for procreation. She is judged for her character and her mannerism, and the word religion in Islam, in the language of the Prophet, means character. So you can pursue a woman for marriage for her beauty, for her money, for her social status. The Prophet said, no, pursue the one with the character. The only thing that she is actually in control of. She has no control if she was born beautiful, rich, or for a good family, but she is in control of her character. She is not an object of desire anymore. A woman in Islam is someone who is equal in so many things that you cannot begin to imagine were even available in the 19th century. She have the right of futya. She can give legal opinions, and many women have that legal opinion. The first commerce secretary that is a female in the history of mankind was Shifa bint Abdullah ibn Abd Shams, who was the commerce secretary at the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He gave her wilayat al-husba, and she used to rule in the matters of the market between men and women. The first political party that is led by I would say feminist party that is led by a woman was Asma bint Yazid al-Ansariya. When she came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, she said, I represent so many women that have the same opinion that I have and saying what I'm saying, and here's what we want, here's what we're asking. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ responded to her. The only holy scripture in the world that when it speaks to the believer, speak to them in female and male terms, is the Quran. Not the Bible, not any other holy scripture. Believing men, believing women, righteous men, righteous women, and so on and so forth. Whoever would do a righteous deed, male or female, we would reward him well, and so on and so forth. The only chapter in any holy scripture, the Gospels in the Bible or the Gospels that are outside in the Bible, that is named after a woman, is in the Quran. And which woman she might be? She is the greatest woman that ever lived and will ever live. That's Virgin Mary, peace be upon her. And in Islam, she is such a pious woman. That's why she was blessed to be the mother of a great, mighty prophet of God. The only chapter in all holy scriptures, that is chapter An-Nisa, the women, that is almost a manifesto of unprecedented women rights now and then. Islam is not defending the rights of women. Islam, and I represent that position, shows the rights of women that is unprecedented today. That is in Islam. Watch Robert Spencer now coming to you with extreme examples of rural areas of 10 villages somewhere and try to generalize him over the entire population of 1.6 billion. Watch him bring in twisted and misinterpreted and totally omissions and mistranslation of books that only God knows where he got their translations from. Watch the circus.
Okay, Robert Spencer, little transition there. We'll reset the clock for you. You have 7 minutes, and you can begin anytime.
Thank you. I think that I'm not going to argue this point. I'm going to let the Quran do it. And the Quran says, men have authority over women because God has made the one superior to the other, and because they spend their wealth to maintain them. Now, I would ask the learned Imam Moustafa Zayed if that's a mistranslation or taking it out of context. What is the context that would justify such a statement? Men have authority over women because God has made the one superior to the other. The question before us is, Islam guarantees equality of men and women. Obviously, that flatly contradicts the Quran. And so I assume that Imam Mustafa, as a believer in the Quran, believes that God has made men superior to women. The passage goes on. Good women are obedient. They guard their unseen parts because God has guarded them. As for those from whom you fear disobedience, admonish them, forsake them in beds apart, and beat them. And beat them. The learned Imam was very eloquent in saying that the Quran is the only scripture which addresses believers as both male and female. That, of course, is flatly false, but we are not here, I would remind him, to discuss the Bible or Christianity. We are here to discuss Islam and whether Islam mandates equality of rights for women and men. And so the fact is that the Quran does indeed tell believers that they should be distinguished male and female. They should understand that as being a fundamentally important distinction and does address them as such. And it does not say that women can beat a disobedient man. It says that men can beat disobedient women. The Quran also has this distinction of being the only scripture that mandates spousal abuse. The reality of this spousal abuse is such that in the Islamic world, it is relatively frequent and is taken for granted. And there is a very common hadith, which I'm sure the Imam will be able to refresh us about, in which some Muslims approach Muhammad and ask him what they should beat their wives with. And as it happens, he's brushing his teeth at the time, so he holds up his miswak, his toothbrush, and says, with this, which has been interpreted as meaning that a Muslim should only beat his wife in a symbolic way, and so as not to cause her any pain or cause her any harm. And that's a beautiful thing, I suppose, relatively. A symbolic wife beating seems to me to be perhaps less painful, but still rather an odd concept. But unfortunately, it's contradicted by other hadith. For example, when Aisha, Muhammad's favorite wife, whom he married when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9 and he was 54, she recalls a time when Muhammad, quote, struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. That's Sahih Muslim 2127. And so it appears that he himself did not just use his toothbrush to beat his disobedient wife. And of course, Muhammad being the excellent example of conduct, that is unfortunately the behavior that is sanctioned as having the example of the Prophet behind it as something that Muslims can and should with Prophet imitate. And so we see on Saudi television from the Kingdom of the Two Holy Places, a place where it is very self-consciously dedicated to being obedient to every aspect of Islam, actual television programs discussing the proper implements for wife beating. Now, the problem here is not just wife beating. The question before us, again, is about the equality of rights of women with men. In the Judeo-Christian Western civilization, of course, while this has been a long battle and something that has many vicissitudes, as the Imam has pointed out, there is the fundamental idea that women and men are equal in dignity before God and thus should have equality of rights before the law. But in the Quran, it's very different. The Imam Mustafa pointed out that women could testify in court, but he did not bother to tell you about Quran chapter 2, verse 282, which says that you should get 2 witnesses out of your own men, and if there are not 2 men, then a man and 2 women, such as you choose for witnesses, so that if one of them forgets, the other can remind her. And on this basis, Muhammad himself, in a very famous hadith, told women that he had seen a vision of hell, and there were many more women in hell than men. And the reason why, he said, when the women indignantly asked him why that was, he responded that it's because women were deficient in religion and in intellect. And they asked him again, how is that? And he pointed to this verse of the Quran and said, you're deficient in intellect, obviously, because your testimony is devalued, and deficient in religion because when menstruating, you're not allowed to pray in the mosque. And so this was an inequality of intellect an inequality of spirituality, an inequality of rights before the law resulting from it. And so here again, the question before us is, does Islam guarantee equality of rights to women? Obviously, by the testimony of the Quran itself and Islamic law, and Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, it manifestly does not. Chapter 4, verse 11 of the Quran says, Allah directs you as regards your children's inheritance. To the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. Let me repeat that. To the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. That is not equality of rights. Now, I would remind you once again that I am quoting from the Quran, and the Imam Moustafa may say that this is all out of context, but he cannot, at least if he has any interest in the truth, which is of course not at all established, but if he does, then he cannot deny that these things are elements of Islamic law to this day, and that in Islamic law, as is the consensus, the ijma of all the 4 madhab of the Sunnis, the schools of jurisprudence, it is agreed upon by them that a man should have greater inheritance rights than a woman, that a woman should not have the same value in her testimony as a man, and indeed is barred from testifying at all in cases of zina or sexual indiscretion, even if she is the victim. Testimony is devalued altogether. And that there is this mandate for inequality that manifests itself in many ways, which I'm sure we will discuss. But the record of Islamic law is clear. And so this is not the matter of some obscure village or out of context citations. This is a matter of the Quran itself as interpreted by mainstream Islamic authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Thank you, Robert. We will now move into the first rebuttal, and you have, at this point, Moustafa, you have 5 minutes, and you may start right now.
Thank you. Mr. Spencer quoted a verse in the Quran that is chapter 4, number 34. And obviously, exactly as I predicted, the verse says, الرجال قوامون على النساء. The verb that Mr. Spencer conveniently, totally obliterated, قوامون means to attend to. The building superintendent is not the owner of the building or the boss of all the tenants. Attend to. The responsibility of the man to be the man in the house, as in our American culture, stems from what the verse is after that, by them providing the family and carrying the responsibility of the family. So men are no way better than women in Islam. So easy, I can go to the Quran, and when the word says white, I can translate it conveniently to the word black, as per Mr. Spencer and what he does all the time. Mr. Spencer will never tell you the other verse in the Quran that says, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. They have the same rights and obligations as men have rights and obligations. And the only degree that a man by default has, which is that he would be responsible for the family, is conditioned if he qualifies by when he supports the family, when he feeds and provides for the family. So there's nowhere in the Quran or the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that men are better than women. And I would challenge him with any dictionary that qawwamun means superior, only in the language of Mr. Spencer. And I'm shocked, actually, that Mr. Spencer, in the myriad of the nonsense that he brought verse 282, that I caught him, and I put a nationwide press release that the verse speaks about financial transactions, how to record them, when Mr. Spencer removed that in his book, The Truth About Muhammad, and claimed that the verse is about rape victims. Just show you the man who's, talking about, well, if I know my Quran or not. And he dares to bring it back in again, read his book and read my press release, and I'm going to put it on my blog tomorrow. The second thing, Mr. Spencer speaks about the same verse 434 when it says, well, if they commit nushuz, he'd say that, well, you can go ahead and beat him for any situation. The verse specifically, وَالَّتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهِنْ, the word nushuz is repeated only 2 times in the Quran. One time when it pertains to the nushuz of a wife, and one time in 4:128 when it pertains to the nushuz of a man. So it's not obedience or disobedience. Nushuz is when I go into a higher ground to look further. In the case of marriage, is to look further for another man or another woman. A man, when he looks for another woman in Islam with restrictions and guidelines, he can go ahead and get married publicly with, if the, meets the guidelines. But when a woman looks for another man, that's an abomination. And then you do not need to go to Imam Moustafa Zayed or any interpreter or anyone or any hadith. Let's go to the Prophet himself talking about the case, the exceptional case of when a wife's to be beaten. Rule number 1, لا تضربوا إماء الله. You cannot beat up the girls of Allah, as per the hadith. That's the general rule. The extreme exception is when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in the greatest day in human history, when he said that the religion now is perfect and complete, he said, "Istawsu bin nisa'i khayra," deal with women righteously and equitably, and that's the general rule. إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِيَنَّ بِفَاحِشَةٍ مُبِينَةٍ, unless they come and commit a apparent abomination. Then فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ ضَرْبًا غَيْرَ مُبْرِحٍ, then beat him lightly, a slap on the wrist. In our legal courts, when somebody gets a judgment that is a slap of the wrist, that means that he got the lightest judgment ever. So when the wife commits a crime that is aberrant abomination, two things: you want to give her to the cop, you want to give her to the correctional facility officer, you want to give her to the judge, or within her household, the husband will give her a psychological punishment that is a slap on the wrist. Which way you prefer? The rule is لا تضربوا إماء الله. But as I said, he goes to the extreme situation of a crime and try to make it the general rule. The thing about the inheritance, there's 34 cases of potential inheritance. 4 cases, a woman inherits half of the man. 30 cases, the other 30 cases, a woman inherits more, inherits the same, and in some cases, about 6 cases, she inherits and the man does not inherit whatsoever. So Mr. Spencer quotes you the 4 cases and does not quote you the remainder of the 30 cases. When he said that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that, a majority of hellfire might be of women, and when they asked him, he put in another hadith totally different about that you use emotions more than you use reason, and you have lesser ritual duties than men. He mixed 2 hadith together in his way. If you don't know, if you don't read, to confuse you, and I'll post on my blog both hadith, and you will see how Mr. Spencer is trying to outright deceive you.
Okay, well, we have one last rebuttal. This is for you, Robert. We have the clock reset now for 5 minutes, and then we'll be going into our break. So, Robert Spencer, 5 minutes.
Thank you. The deceiver here is the Imam Moustafa, as is clear from anybody who looks at the actual translations of the first part of verse 434, which he was disputing. He's saying that I made it up, that it says that it makes men superior to women. That's actually, I was reading from the translation of N.J. Dawood, who's a native speaker of Arabic from Iraq. I guess he got it wrong, or maybe I told him that he ought to mistranslate it in that way. But we can also go to the Muslim translators, Abdullah Yusuf Ali, very common mainstream translation, and he says, men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has given the one more than the other. And Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall, a celebrated English convert to Islam, who wrote another very common translation, men are in charge of women because Allah has made the one of them to excel the other. And M.J. Shakir, men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others. And so apparently, with my deceiving black arts, I have misled all of these translators who wrote before I was born into mistranslating this verse in exactly the same way, to say that men excel women or are superior to women, and obviously not that they are equal to women. And so it's clear that the Imam Moustafa, while self-righteously claiming that I am deceiving, is actually trying to deceive on a grand scale. He's actually written a book-length treatment that is full of deceit called The Lies About Muhammad, which is very aptly named because that's all it is. And another one regards chapter 2, verse 282, which he's saying that he caught me out on. Actually, the Quran itself, it says, as I quoted before, that you should get a male witness, and if you cannot get a male witness, then you get, if there are not 2 men, then a man and 2 women, such as you choose for witnesses, so that if one of them errs, the other can remind her. That is the translation of Abdullah Yusuf Ali. It has nothing to do with rape in the context of the Quran, and I never said it did, but it does come into questions of rape when women's testimony is disallowed altogether, as is something that comes from Islamic law. Now, as far as the beating of the wife, it's interesting to note that this learned imam is actually granting that a husband does have the responsibility to beat a disobedient woman in Islam, but he's trying to convince us that it is a matter of only beating her lightly or giving her a tap on the wrist. Once again, I refer to translations of the Quran. These are all translations of the Quran made either by Muslims or by Islamic scholars. They are not my translations of the word in question, waridubhunna, and it says in Pickthall, and scourge them, or Sher Ali, and chastise them. Rodwell also, scourge them. Khalifa, Rashid Khalifa, beat them. Also Shakir beat them. Al-Hilali and Khanse beat them lightly, as does Yusuf Ali, but that lightly is not in the Arabic, as I'm sure that the Imam Mustafa, were he truthful, would have to admit. And that since, as I quoted the hadith, which is from Bukhari, no, I'm sorry, from Muslim, that says that he hit Aisha and caused her pain, it is hard to understand how, if Muhammad is the supreme example of conduct, that his example would not be exemplary in this one particular. And I wonder what the authorities at Al-Azhar would think of Moustafa Zayed if they heard him contradicting Muhammad on this point. As for the other hadith in which women predominate in hell, that is easily found online, and if he's going to post his lies about it, I will post the truth about it at Jihad Watch tomorrow and give you the hadiths in question. There's also a great deal more, of course, that we were not able to address for reasons of time. For example, Muhammad saying, and this is a Bukhari hadith, if a husband calls his wife to his bed to have sexual relations and she refuses and causes him to sleep in anger, the angels will curse her till morning. And this is the foundation of the Islamic law, that a woman has no right to refuse sexual intercourse to her husband for any reason at any time. That reduces her essentially to the status of an object for procreation or sexual pleasure. It's kind of ironic that the Imam Mustafa said in his initial statement that a woman is not the object of desire, because it's essentially all that she is in Islam, is a plaything for sexual relations and a cook, of course, and so on, but that's about it. There's another hadith in the same way. By him in whose hand lies my life, a woman cannot carry out the right of her Lord till she carries out the right of her husband. And if he asks her to surrender herself to him for sexual intercourse, she should not refuse him, even if she is on a camel's saddle. Now, this is plainly just another species of slavery, and has nothing to do with equality of rights. Whatever smoke this learned and highly deceitful Imam chooses to blow tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Moustafa. We have now just gone through the first 30 minutes or so of our first section of tonight's program. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue with our two apologists. Again, Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. We'll continue to discuss that tonight. Stay tuned also for an opportunity to give us a phone call here at 248-416-1300 with your questions. We look forward to that, and we'll be right back after this brief break. Welcome back to Debate Night on this August 12, 2011, and we're excited about this continuing topic tonight, which we are debating between Moustafa Zayed and Robert Spencer, our Muslim and non-Muslim apologist. Again, the topic is Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. The debate continues. Just a reminder to clarify, we will be taking our calls at the last break, but think about the opportunity to speak tonight. Again, the number is 248-416-1300. We won't be taking those calls until we get to our last break, which is roughly a half hour from now. Speaking of time, we're going to go ahead and start that clock at 5 minutes. Mustafa, you have rebuttal number 2, and you can start right now.
All right. I just hope for the people who would see this online recorded to go back to the only translation that Mr. Spencer picked for the word qawamun. He chose superior to, which what I told him it does not mean. And Arabic, believe it or not, is my native language. He said, well, other people said it too. Look, Yusuf Ali said protector and provider. I ask any second grader, does protector mean superior to? Does provider mean superior to? And then he went to another translation, in charge of. If I am in charge of a diamond, that means it's mine, that I'm superior to it. I'm in charge of 100 children, then my life is better than them, or I'm superior to them. It's, again, the twisted translation, and the only one that he picks, N.J. Dawood, I never heard of his translation. Couldn't care less if he's native Arabic or not. Attend means to be a protector, to be in charge of. There has to be a leader for the family. By default, that leader is chosen by Allah to be the man, like any other culture, predominantly, and only when he qualifies. That's number one. The second thing, when he goes to the witnessing, he chooses, again, the exception. In financial transactions, you know, if you don't have one man, bring two women, because women by nature go to Wall Street and tell me how many women as a percentage of all the working men. But he would totally forego all the other cases where a testimony of a woman is exactly the same as a man. In all kind of cases of Islamic law, except her witnessing a crime of zina or armed robbery where there's going to be a penal code. I mean, he should be ashamed when he says that if she was the rape victim, her word would not be taken. How could it be a case that is to be prosecuted if the victim did not even complain to begin with? And that's her testimony. Totally wrong. When she is an outside witness to the event of the hurt that happened, then Islam avoids and protects the woman nature from getting into violent crimes. Testimony is a husband against her wife when it comes to infidelity. In Surah An-Nur, chapter 24, 6-9, her testimony is exactly the same. In the case of Sayyidah Aisha, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ pushed her. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a powerful man, and he was not beating her whatsoever. He never beat anyone, not even his servants. And I will post the same hadith that he's talking about. When I quote him mixing two hadith together, when they asked him why are some women are majority who fell fire, and he brought an answer from a totally different hadith, I didn't say that one of them is not authentic. I said that you mixed two authentic hadith together. Out of ignorance or not, even if you knew, I would not trust that you would tell the truth. The third thing, we're not talking about disobedience when we're talking about the beating of a wife. It's a wife who committed a crime. At that remote, very exceptional situation, should we hand her to the law, or should be dealt with a slap on the wrist within the household? And I'm not justifying that for disobedient wives, for a wife who committed an apparent crime as per the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Apparent abomination. The other thing is the refusal of having intercourse. The hadith is apparent and clear, and you don't need to be a genius to look at interpretation or foundation of Islamic law. The hadith said that the angels would be cursing her till the morning comes. It did not say that the husband should force her into sex. That is a despicable, that is something that is resentful in Islam, that a law-abiding, a chastised man want to have his normal intercourse with his wife, and his wife would refuse for no reason. Mr. Spencer, as usual, would slip you in that for any reason, for anything. What if she has her period? Totally forbidden to come near the wife. What if she's ill? What if she's sick? But Mr. Spencer will tell you for any reason, he is, in Spencer land, he's creating his own law and he's making new things. Again, look at the translation that he used and look at what he's talking about. And again, in witnessing, he does not want to, say that he totally mutilated a verse in the Quran from the case of financial witnessing to a case of rape victims. And when I caught him, he said, oh, look at Surah An-Nur. It says, they have to be men. And I brought him, and I'll post it again, that it means shuhud, means witnesses. It didn't specify men or didn't specify women. So again, take the extreme case. generalize it, incite hatred against Muslims, anything Muslims, confuse hadith together, a word that means white translated as black, and tell me names of people that nobody had ever heard of. The only people that are reputable translators, even though I say that they have some mistakes in translation by nature, Yusuf Ali said protector, did not say superior. The other Shakir said in charge of, he did not say superior. Who's saying superior? Mr. Spencer, because the job is to incite hatred and demonize all Muslims with the simple-minded people who cannot read for themselves and cannot even understand English. Superior does not mean protector. A woman who's looking for a major abomination of the crime of an apparent abomination is not a disobedient wife. That's someone who committed a crime, and that's the best punishment that you give her, a slap on the wrist.
Okay.
Again, typical Spencer.
Thank you, Mustafa. That was the last part of the second rebuttal there. Now we have one more 5-minute portion of time here for Robert Spencer for your second rebuttal. Robert, the clock is set. You may start right now.
The elaborateness and sophistication and persistence of the Imam Mustafa's deceptions is truly breathtaking. And as a liar, I think he is really unsurpassed today. Really, it's extraordinary what he's doing here, the sleight of hand in regard to this passage in chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran. He's arguing about the word that is translated by Ali as men are the protectors and maintainers of women, the word being the protectors and maintainers part, or by Pickthall as men are in charge of women, or by Dawood as men have authority over women. But that part is not in dispute. The part that he is taking issue with is in Dawood's translation as God has made the one superior to the other, which is the next part of the verse. So he's actually getting all upset about the Arabic word that I'm not disputing the meaning of, because that is not the problem. Ali says men are the protectors and maintainers of women. That part is not in dispute. And then he goes on to say, because Allah has given the one more than the other. But he doesn't want you to notice that part because it shows the inequality of the women. Or as Pickthall, another Muslim, has it, men are in charge of women because Allah has made the one of them to excel the other. He doesn't tell you all about the Arabic word for in charge, the gun given the one more than the other, or excel the other, or superior to the other in the Dawood translation, because that, of course, would not serve his argument. And instead, he's trying to fool the listener into thinking that the argument is really about the part that is translated as men are the protectors and the sustainers of women or have authority over women, which is not the issue at all. It's the same thing with zina. It's a matter of established fact in Islamic law that women's testimony is not allowed in crimes of zina. And as far as the mixing the two hadiths together, you notice that he said he's very excited and speaking quickly, but go back and listen to it again, and you will hear that he says he's not saying one's authentic and one's inauthentic. So see, I'm speaking from memory here, and I am speaking about hadiths which I will produce on the website Jihad Watch tomorrow or tonight if I get a chance. And the reality is that there are hadiths that are considered authentic by Muslims in which Muhammad says that most of the people in hell are women, and in which Muhammad says that women are deficient in religion and in intellect. And he doesn't even dispute the authenticity of those. Instead, he's trying to make a big deal out of my putting them together in a conversational presentation. Well, that's ridiculous. One hadith, two hadiths, fine. The question is it part of Islamic doctrine that Muhammad said these things? Yes, these hadiths are considered authentic. And so the question is, do Muslims believe that they're mostly women in hell? If they believe Muhammad, yes. Do Muslims believe that women are deficient in religion and in intellect? If they believe Muhammad, yes. Do Muslims believe that they have a right to beat their wives and not just as a symbolic tap on the wrist, as he ridiculously claims? Well, let me just note that the Pakistan Institute of Medical Sciences, which is not, as far as I know, an enterprise that I am in charge of or that I have created, and probably is predominantly made up of Muslims, they have determined that over 90% of women in Pakistan, over 90%, have been struck, beaten, or sexually abused, often for trivial offenses. The problem is one man's tap and slap on the wrist is another man's brutal beating. These things can all too often be in the eye of the beholder. Once you've given the sanction to the behavior, that's where the trouble begins. And Islam does sanction wife beating, and Muslims beat their wives. The Imam Muhammad Kamal Mustafa, an imam in Spain in 2004, was found guilty by a Spanish court of inciting violence on the basis of gender because in his book, Women in Islam, he discussed the methods of administering physical punishment of women. And so this was something that was clear, was real, was taken very seriously. And so this is a problem all around the Islamic world. He can pretend and deceive foolish and ignorant people into thinking that it's something that I'm making up. But that is just another part of the sophistication of his deception. This man is a very good liar. But the texts say what they say. And all the Islamic translations of the Quran, they say in the beginning part of chapter 4, verse 34, that in some way that men are superior to or excel or are greater than or have more than women. And they say that a man should beat his disobedient wife. And Muhammad did that to Aisha, which you'll notice he did not address at all, and caused her pain. And he, being the exemplary pattern of conduct, as per chapter 33, verse 21 of the Quran, that is a very dangerous passage in the Hadith.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Robert. Okay, now we're going to go into a little section of what we call crossfire. Each of you will have 3 minutes, and we've reset the clock, because at this point, Moustafa, you've got 3 minutes, and you may begin right now.
All right. Please, whoever is going to watch this recorded after that, please watch from the beginning and watch Robert Spencer retrace what he says quickly. First of all, it was that the victim of rape cannot testify for herself. And now he's saying, oh, women cannot testify in that case, which is the second part is the correct part. But in the beginning, he was not saying that till I exposed him. The second thing, the part that he says, oh, that's the part that means superior. It says, bima faddala Allahu ba'duhum ala ba'd. By what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preferred some over the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the verse did not specify men or women who's better than each one. As I said, they complement each other. It could be the woman that has a better aspect than the man, or the man has a better aspect. If bima faddala Allahu ba'dhum ala ba'd, by what Allah preferred some of the other, can you extract from me which is man and which is woman? I'll give you the Nobel Peace Prize, but I'm not going to give it to you. The second thing, Robert Spencer totally ignores, and he'll never tell you that, and you should ask yourself, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. They have the same rights and obligations as men do, women do. In Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, number 28. The other one, he keeps saying that you beat a disobedient wife. I explained so many times that the verb in the 2 verses is nushuz, which is committing an abomination or about to commit abomination. And I brought the explanation of the Prophet of Islam himself, saying you never beat the woman, you treat him righteously and equitably, unless they commit an apparent crime. They become a criminal, and then there has to be a punishment, and then there's degrees. It's not beating right away. You give them advice, you abstain from them in bed, and then after that you go and you give them a slap on the wrist, which is the lightest punishment after they commit a crime. So he makes the crime or the criminal the major case. Again, watches how he retracts. He said that Muhammad, when the woman asked him why a majority of women in hellfire are going to be that way, and he said the answer is that they're deficient in mind and so on and so forth. The answer is a totally different hadith, and it's a totally different thing. In the second hadith, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was praising women. He said, I never seen more people that have their emotions supersedes their reason, that they can take away the mind of a firm and an intellectual man. It's a praise. And the lack of ritual duties is by the license of God. When they're pregnant, when they have their period, and subhanAllah, when they get pregnant, that's how I came to life, and so does Mr. Spencer. That's a license from God. That is not something to be ashamed or make him a list of worshippers. In all aspects of Islam, they're the same. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, your best are your best to their women, and I am the best to my women. He used to clean his house. He used to do house chores. When his wife was sick, he used to do house chores for her. He would get grocery for her. He would milk his sheep. He would do everything for his wife. And he said, خدمتك زوجتك صدقة. When you serve your wife, you will get the reward as if you're given a generous charity. That is the Prophet of Islam, and that is Robert Spencer.
Okay, thank you, Moustafa. Robert, you've got 3 minutes for your portion of Crossfire. We've reset the clock, and you may start right now.
Thank you. Actually, there's no difference in what I said from one part to the other about the testimony of women. Actually, women's testimony is not allowed in crimes of zina, even if she is the victim. He exposed nothing except his own lies, because, as a matter of fact, it has been established even by Muslim women's rights groups, like the wonderful group in Malaysia, Sisters in Islam, that most of the women who are in prison in countries like Pakistan and others, where zina has traditionally been understood as being in the realm of hudud punishments, in the realm of Islamic law, rather than in the civil law, that most of the women in prison are there because they were victims of rape, but their testimony is inadmissible, and they don't have the witnesses to prove that they were raped, because Islamic law stipulates in chapter 24, verse 4 and 24, verse 13 of the Quran that in such crimes there has to be four male Muslim witnesses who saw the act. And that's obviously something that is essentially impossible to establish. And as for wife beating, you notice once again that he's admitting that a man can legitimately and lawfully beat his disobedient wife. And that's really all I'm interested in establishing, because that is a howling inequality. And what we have before us here is the question of whether women are treated equally in Islam or not. But any thing that can be beaten like a pack animal when disobedient is not equal. And here again, he does not treat the hadith that I have brought forward that is from Sahih Muslim and is thus considered to be authentic by Muslims, in which Aisha says that Muhammad, and I quote, struck me on the chest which caused me pain. And that is not something that is a symbolic or light thing. When it involves pain, it involves pain. And obviously beating a wife or scourging or chastising, as these various Muslim translations have it, is something that's going to cause pain. It's not something that is some sort of a love tap, and that's a ridiculous apologetic notion that's designed to fool Westerners into thinking that there's no problem here. But unfortunately there is, and we haven't even dealt with so much more that renders women unequal, like polygamy. That a man can have 4 wives and as many sexual slaves as he wishes out of the captives his right hand possesses. That is something that, unfortunately for Mr. Zayed, has been recently reaffirmed by several Islamic clerics, that there ought to be the revival of sexual slavery of non-believing women who are captured and made into prostitutes or sexual slaves by their Muslim captors. This has been recently reaffirmed, actually by a female legislator in Kuwait and by another Islamic cleric. And so he's pulling the wool over our eyes, but I am not going to allow it to happen.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, we at this point will give each of you 6 minutes, starting with Moustafa, to make your closing comments, your closing statement for the evening. Again, 6 minutes, and then we'll be going to break. And so at this point, we just want to remind everybody we'll be taking your calls after this next break. But at this point, we're going to take the next 6 minutes times 2, 12 minutes. Moustafa, you are up first. Thank you.
All right. Again, look at the progression of Mr. Spencer withdrawing from the false claims that he used in the beginning. It was superior at one part of the verse, and then the other verse was supposed to now means superior, and I proved that neither speak about man or women, so that's ended. What I mentioned is not the authenticity of the 2 quotations that he did, but a part of his deceptions, that when the women asked him why the majority are of women from hellfire, he's talked about because they're ungrateful to their husbands who gave him everything, and just for one mistake that they make, they claim that he gave us nothing. Ungratefulness. The other hadith is a totally different hadith and a totally different incident. The incident of Sayyida Aisha, I challenged him to bring me the incident of by which she's supposed to be disobedient, and then Prophet Muhammad had beaten her. Sayyida Aisha was the greatest probably wife of Prophet Muhammad. She was never disobedient to him, and she said dafa'ani, he pushed me. She didn't say struck me, and she was not disobedient. And I'm going to publish that hadith tomorrow. Again, push me is not struck me, and she was never disobedient. Again, please, Mr. Spencer, read my lips. I never said beat a disobedient wife. I said bear the hadith of the Prophet of Islam, not some Pakistani or Malaysian rural areas in some tent village, that if she commits an apparent crime. Can you read my lips if you cannot hear me, please? I never said disobedient. I said the crime of nushuz, an apparent crime. If you can understand English anymore. The other thing is, when we go to the witnesses again, the sandbox of Mr. Spencer, when he tries to take the poorest countries, the most war-stricken countries, and try to generalize them over Islam, his favorite sandbox, maybe Afghanistan or Afghanistan. He bring me an enterprise in Pakistan where somebody said this, or some female or a clerk in Spain said something. Well, if it violates what in the Quran and the model behavior of Prophet Muhammad, then these people have committed a crime and violated Islamic law. And for the 100th times, you cannot judge Islam by the criminal of the fuse. You can judge people by Islamic law. And again, what matters here, and what I want to explain to the viewers, it's not the what, it's the why. why Mr. Spencer is doing this, why Mr. Spencer and his likes are constant inciters of hatreds between Americans. Because that's what he gets paid for. If you look at what was published recently in the past 3 years, $920,000, the majority of them through the Freedom Organization, Freedom Center Organization, was funneled to him through a Zionist extremist by the name of Joyce Kimmick. And that is not published in a Muslim magazine. It is published in the Jerusalem Post of his friends, Israel. It's a business. He makes a lot of money out of that, the same way that Walid Shabat was exposed in CNN. And the biggest problem of that is not how much money he makes or the hatred that he incites amongst people. Look at what happened in Norway. The terrorist in Norway who killed 100 innocent people and injured more, that person quoted Robert Spencer in his manifesto over 64 times and referenced jihadwatch.org over 130 times. And I couldn't care less of the authenticity of what he says. It's not a freedom of speech. It's fabrications, it's lies, it's inciting hatred. And to the simple-minded people, like the insane terrorists in Norway, the result can be innocent people killed, mostly young kids in a summer camp. And we would be mistaken if we allow that venom to spread of the lies and fabrications and the discrimination against Muslim in America, where you can buy a machine gun that you can kill a dinosaur with just by showing your photo ID in some states. So Mr. Spencer makes a living inciting hatred amongst people. And if I was any of the people of Norway, I would have sued Mr. Spencer as an instigator of that crime of hatred, because that's the ideology that he makes. The followers of Mr. Spencer are not people who read from themselves or can look at translations and objectively understand what is being thrown at them. It's the simple-minded, hatred and entertainment seekers, people who want to polarize and hate something just to give a meaning of the life or just bring resentment against someone out there. And if we help that, then one of us or someone who's related to us, Muslim or non-Muslim, any American of any creed, would be the victim soon. The blood of these innocent people in Norway is in Mr. Spencer's hand, and God forbid there are going to be other crimes of that hatred and incitement. Why Mr. Spencer is telling us all that, and he's supposed to enlighten us about Islam, and he has no proper education in Islam. He does not speak the language. He has not major references. And the matter of fact, I quote him in his book saying something in one page that, oh, Muhammad evidently believed the rumors about his wife. The following page, he says, he brings an authentic hadith that Muhammad says, I never believed anything like that. It's copy and paste, things that are laughable. He claims that dhimmi in Arabic means ugly. Manzil, where the stopping location is now a house, and all these laughable things. But the problem is his followers are simple-minded, they don't understand, and the hatred is like we're spilling gasoline above our population, waiting for the next spark of the next terrorist to hurt us all. Why the hatred? The blood is on your hand, Mr. Spencer. Drug dealers, no drugs kill, but the money is good. And the money that you make is good from the worst enemies of Islam, the extreme right-wing Zionists of Israel, as published in Jerusalem Post. I don't think the money is worth it. And any decent American, Muslim or non-Muslim, should be alert to the venom and the hatred that is being spread all over the world about Muslims, and specifically in America. Muslims make 3% of the population, maybe 25% of the doctors that heals all Americans are Muslims. Over 25% of the hate crimes against Americans are committed against American Muslims, and the instigator is right there. Mr. Spencer incites hatred for a living. His lies are exposed, and I put him in the book, The Lies About Muhammad. Most of the women that accept Islam in my class, most of the people are from the women gender, highly educated women, and Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world.
Thank you, Moustafa. That was your last 6 minutes of your closing statement. Now, Robert, you have 6 minutes to make your closing statement, then we'll be going to break.
Okay, I'm going to have to respond to some of this, although you'll note that the topic is not the evils of Robert Spencer. The topic is, does Islam treat women equally and consider them equal? And that has been amply established that they do not, even by Moustafa Zayed. But the character assassination and viciousness of this man is clear now. It's really breathtaking how he will stoop to this kind of defamation and demonization. And it's interesting because he is claiming that I engage in hate speech, but he is obviously trying to get people to hate me. And so I would wonder if he thinks that if those of Muslims who give me daily death threats, if those Muslims actually succeed in killing me, will he consider that he himself has blood on his hands for trying to demonize me and get people to hate me tonight? That would be a very interesting thing. But whether they kill me or not, I'm going to keep telling the truth up until I die. And the fact is that I had nothing to do with the Norway killing any more than the Beatles have to do with Charles Manson's killings. The man cited me, he cited Barack Obama, he cited John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, Charles Darwin. He plagiarized the Unabomber, but nobody is saying that radical environmentalists are to blame for this. He started plotting violence in the 1990s before I had published anything about Islam except in a college setting, which he never could not have seen. He was already plotting violence long before I was ever doing anything publicly in this line. And in regard to incitement, I would challenge the Imam Moustafa Zayed or anyone to actually produce a single genuine example of my telling anybody to commit violence against anyone or to hate anyone. Obviously, he wants you to hate me, but all I'm doing here is telling the truth. And so it's very interesting that he once again is proving the adage, as St. Paul said, have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? He cannot stand the truth. He keeps lying about chapter 4, verse 34, which I explained that he was taking issue with the part of the verse that is acknowledged to mean that men are the protectors and sustainers of women, then completely ignoring and obfuscating the following part, which is translated by Muslims as, but because Allah has made the one to excel the other, or in Dawood's translation, to be superior to the other. He keeps trying to make a big deal out of these hadith that I quoted being different, but the fact is that they are both considered authentic, all considered authentic. He outright lies about this hadith in which Muhammad says, in which Aisha says, and I quote, he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain, and then said, did you think that Allah and his apostle would deal unjustly with you? That's Muhammad saying, Muhammad striking her on the chest, and Aisha saying that Muhammad struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. That is the translation of Sahih Muslim 2127 by Abdul Hamid Siddiqui, who is himself a Muslim. And so I would wonder if Mr. Zayed thinks that I somehow got the ear of Abdul Hamid Siddiqui and deceived him into mistranslating this passage, which he is now lying about. But the fact is that all the lies and hate are not coming from me. They're coming from Moustafa Zayed and people like him. And that is because they cannot stand to have the truth about Islam told. The fact is that Islam institutionalizes discrimination against women. It institutionalizes the commodification of women. And anything he says about me is not going to change that because I did not originate it. The fact is that polygamy is mandated in the Quran. He never mentioned anything about that because he can't deny it. The fact is that the Quran also stipulates that a man can divorce his wife by saying, talaq, I divorce you 3 times. And if he does it the 3rd time, then she is divorced definitively, has to marry another man and consummate that marriage and be divorced by him before she can go back to her first husband if he chooses to have her back. That's a kind of a monstrous and barbaric law, but that is part of Islamic law. And it certainly has nothing to do with equality of rights for women. He didn't say anything about the sex slaves, because he cannot deny, as I said, that Islamic imams, not Spencer, but Islamic imams themselves have called for the revival of this practice, which is Quranic. The Quran in chapter 4, verse 3 says that a man can marry up to 4 wives and then have captives that his right hand possesses, that is, sex slaves. And there is a traditional legal category for sexual slavery in Islam, while a woman has to cover everything except her face and hands, according to Muhammad in the Hadith. And in Islamic law, the sex slaves are actually always to be naked from the waist up and accessible to their owner whenever he wishes. And this is obviously something else that is monstrous and barbaric, but that Moustafa Zayed would pass over in silence and then spend all his time smearing and defaming me and trying to incite violence against me in order to divert attention away from that. Well, you know something? I don't care. It's not as if I'm not going to die if I don't do this work. And he's the idea that I've been getting $900,000 is fanciful. I wish I had gotten $900,000 because I could certainly use it to expose his lies and the lies of other people like him and be able to greatly expand my operations. But actually, I've gotten nothing like that. And even if I had, it's irrelevant. Even if I'm the richest man in the world and the most evil man in the world, the question before us is, does Islam allow for the equality of rights of women with men? And manifestly, it does not. And I think it's just shameful that he would spend all his time spreading hatred against people who tell the truth about Islam. So desperate is he to deceive unbelievers about this agenda. One must ask, why? What's the overall point of deceiving us in this way?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Well, we've gotten 2/3 into our program, and right now it's an opportunity for you to pick up the phone and call us at 248-416-1300. 248-416-1300. I hear the phone ringing right now. We will be taking a brief break. We'll be coming right back. At that point, we'll be taking our callers and get ready for your questions as we continue with tonight's topic. Again, Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. We want you to, we encourage you, implore you to stick to the topic when you ask your questions. We'll give you that opportunity to ask either a gentleman tonight, Moustafa Zayed or Robert Spencer, our Muslim and non-Muslim apologists, respectively. Again, we'll be right back after this quick break for your questions.
Are you a Christian who loves watching ABN shows? Are you eager to make a video and post it online and see it reach millions of Middle Eastern people? Or are you a Muslim who wants an outlet to ask questions, make comments, or post video responses to Christian evangelists and apologists? Well, ABN Tube has it all. ABN Tube is an extended media outlet of ABN TV Ministry. We've gotten an overwhelming response from viewers of ABN to launch a media outlet for people like you to upload your own video responses to some of the clips we have online, whether on ABNSAT.com or on our ABNSAT YouTube account. Our goal is to bring to light any and all lies about false religion through media, to create an open dialogue about religion among people of different faith, and to gear them to the truth of Jesus Christ. Please visit our site at www.abntube.com. Thank you. If you have any questions, please visit our website at www.abnsat.com. Under the webcast tab, you can view ABN's live streaming channels like Jesus or Muhammad, Youth TV, Apologetics, and more. We also encourage you to donate to our ministry. To do so, click on Donate to ABN under the main menu, then click on Donate button to make your donation. ABN greatly appreciates your help.
All right, welcome back. You've heard from both of our apologists this evening on the topic of Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. We do have a couple of callers. We're going to ask real quick because of the limited time we have left here. Please state your question. Please direct it to each one of the two gentlemen here, Moustafa Zayed or Robert Spencer. Moustafa or Robert, you have 2 minutes to respond, and then if necessary, the other person who doesn't get the question has 1 minute to respond or make a comment on the answer. So at this point, we'll take our first caller. Welcome to Debate Night, and what is your question and who is it directed to?
Yes, good evening. My name is Ashraf Ramla. I might direct my question to Mr. Zayed. He emphasized that Mr. Spencer is acting violence and hate against Islam. I would like to ask him, what about all the Copts killed in Egypt lately? Who instigated this violence against Christians that they don't do anything to anyone?
Okay, Moustafa, you have 2 minutes.
I'm Egyptian. I was born in Alexandria, and I have many Coptic friends. There's a huge problem of people calling regular crimes. When a Muslim kills a Christian or a Christian calls a Muslim, they call it a crime of religion, which is not true. I lived there. I know the people. When you come to a terrorist attack like what happened in Knesset al-Qaddisin in my hometown, Alexandria, that is a terrorist attack, most likely was done by the special forces of Mubarak. I condemn the fact that we did not find the people who done it yet, and that's a big crime because these are my people. However, not that any crime of a victim of violence would be a crime because he's a Christian. Other than that, when I get into a car accident here in America, then Americans are killing Muslims. That is not true. Christians were protected by the Muslims. It is the Muslims who saved the Copt Christians from al-Milkaniyin, the Romans who tortured them. The Pope of the Christians was escaped for 12 years, and he came with the protection of the Muslims. His brother was almost like barbecued, and for lack of a better term, to change his religion. He refused with the protection of Muslims. Christianity survived today. One of the worst Orientalists that he's truly against Islam, Alfred Butler himself admitted that if it wasn't that the Muslims came to Egypt, the Orthodox religion, the Coptic Christian religion, was totally to be annihilated by the Romans. During the Romans, Copts used to pay 14 different kind of taxes. When the Muslim came, it was only 2 dinars. Less than 100 years, the predominant language became Arabic, and 90% of the Coptic Christians accepted Islam as a phase of their own religion and lived in peace for 1400 years. So my heart goes out to the victims of the terrorist attack in Knisset al-Quddusin and any other place, but that has nothing to do with Islam. And if a Muslim commits it, I'm the first one to condemn him. I'm the first one to ask for the maximum punishment upon him. No one should touch any person for his religion or ethnic background whatsoever. And Islamic law is the first one to mandate that, and it's the highest punishment in Islam.
Okay, Robert, you have 1 minute if you'd like to respond to that.
There have been many attacks on churches in Egypt, and so I wonder if it's just incidental that the victims are Christians. Also, he mentioned the Pope, the Coptic Pope Shenouda, who has also spoken out many times complaining about the kidnapping of Christian girls and their forcible conversion to Islam. That's something that has to do with religion. And he lies about the invasion of Egypt in the 7th century. Actually, if you look back at the documents, and I can post this tomorrow at Jihad Watch, an early Egyptian general of the Muslims actually wrote back to his superiors saying, I need more money because I need to cover this land with troops. Obviously, they were not welcoming the conquerors in Egypt. They were resisting them.
Okay. Okay, we have another caller. What is your question, and who is it directed to?
My question is directed to Moustafa Zayed. First, I'd like to thank you for admitting that the Quran inspires and encourages Muslims terrorists. I hope he can come out and condemn the Quran and Hadith with the same passion that he condemned Robert Spencer's writing. Now, my question is for Imam. The Quranic surahs that you gave explanations for, can you tell me if they were Mutashabihat verses, the unclear verses, or are they part of the al-Kitab, the mother of the book? If they're not part of the al-Kitab, then don't you have a disease in your heart for explaining their meaning, as Surah 3:7 states?
Mr. Moustafa, Mr. Zayed.
Well, I apologize to the caller for what I'm going to say. What he says is a characteristic of people who learn about Islam from the haters of Islam. Everything that he said is absolute ignorance, and I can even find the source. Mr. Spencer made that mistake claiming that al-Kitab, which is the original form of the Quran before it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, it's actually the opening chapter, the first chapter of the Quran, which we call al-Fatiha. That is al-Kitab. So the caller is mixing things. I don't know where he got that from. Obviously, he got his Islam information from the likes of Spencer. I urge the people, you want to learn about Judaism? Ask a rabbi. Do not ask the Nazis. So you want to learn about Islam? Read the Quran for yourself, a good translation. Read an authentic hadith for yourself. Do not go to the sworn enemies, people who make a living like Spencer, inciting hatred against Muslims, buy the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then come to Muslim and tell them, you know, this is Islam, defend yourself. This is not Islam. The Quran is one Quran. Read it for yourself. The hadith, the authentic hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ are there. Read it for yourself. Do not quote me, Robert Spencer, and ask me to try to defend Islam and defend something that does not exist. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, you can respond if you like for 1 minute time.
Yeah, you know, here again, he's inciting more hatred and violence. The reality is that the caller made a good point in the first part of what he said, because, you know, this Norway shooting that Zayed is trying to hang me with, the guy did not say and could not have said that he was committing violence because of anything that I had written. He just cited some news articles that I had put up at Jihad Watch. That's hardly an inspiration. But many Islamic terrorists, as a matter of fact, virtually all Islamic terrorists, quote Quran and Hadith to justify violence and to explain why they are committing acts of violence. And so I would wonder if Moustafa Zayed would say that the Quran is therefore inciting hatred and violence, and condemn it in the similar way. But of course he will not. Instead, he just keeps slinging the same demonization and defamation, which is all designed to get us off topic and keep us from looking at the manifest injustices that Islam perpetrates.
Okay. Okay, we are ready for another caller. If we have another caller, what is your question and who is it directed to?
My name is Isa, and my question is directed to Imam Moustafa. You guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please, tell us your question.
I'd like to ask him a question in two parts real quick. He says in Islam, women are equal, correct?
Correct. Go ahead.
Okay. Imam, women are equal in Islam, correct?
Mustafa?
Equitable rights.
So they both are equal. A woman could be sexually immoral just as much as a man, correct?
Yes.
Okay. My quick question is, why is it only the females wear hijab? Why don't the men wear hijab if they are equal?
I don't know what religion that you belong to, but let me ask you, have you ever seen the hair color of Virgin Mary in any picture in any Christian church? No. She only shows her face and her hand. She's the greatest Muslim woman that ever lived and will ever live, and that's how a Muslim woman should dress. Obviously, women are the point of attraction to men, and as mandated by God, even in the Bible, a woman who does not cover her head does not respect her mind. And that's the decency, and that's the disobjectification of women, that they're not an object of desire and respect for them. Women do not lust over men that cover, show their hair, but actually men lust after women if they expose their body and expose their bodies more than that. That is a respect for the women.
Robert, you have 1 minute if you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, sure. You notice the only thing this guy can do in response to this question is criticize Christianity. He can't actually address the fundamental point of the question, which is, if men and women in Islam are equal, then why does the Quran and Islamic law mandate different treatment for women and men? And in response, he starts talking about the Virgin Mary and how she's depicted in Christian iconography. That's all very well, but it doesn't answer the question. The fact is that the Islamic texts and teachings are very clear that women are not equal to men, that they are, indeed, they do have the responsibility to rein in men's desires. Men don't have the responsibility for self-control. It's all on the women, who have to cover up to make sure that the men have no object of desire that will distract them. And that in itself shows that men and women are not equal in Islam, but as a matter of fact, the women are the servants of the men and have to always accommodate the nature of the men, the desires of the men, the demands of the men in every respect, in every detail of their lives.
Okay, we have another caller at this point, and we're ready with your question, and who is it directed to? We are ready for your question. Okay, we might still be waiting for a caller. We are still taking calls. If you haven't called, we have a caller right now. Again, 248-416-1300. Your question, and who is it directed to?
To Mustafa.
Okay.
Yes, I have two questions. One of them is, Islam is a peaceful religion. Why it is the only religion in the world that would kill someone if he becomes Christian or he leaves the Muslim religion? That's number one. Number two is, how can a leader or an apostle of God like Muhammad sleep with a 6-year-old girl? If he happens to be on the 21st century, he would be in jail now, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Your answer, you have 2 minutes if you'd like, Mustafa.
He's talking about apostasy. Apostasy in the context and the purpose of Islamic law is treason. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, whoever changes religion, kill him, that was in the midst of fighting the pagans. And when you change religion at that context, at that specific historical moment, you are joining the enemy's army. It's military defection, it's military treason. And even though that's the case, and that's the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, no one single man was killed with apostasy. And I exposed Robert Spencer when he brought armed robbers who killed shepherds and stole camels as if they were killed and punished for their crime for apostasy. That's number one. The general rule in Islam, no compulsion in religion, la ikraha fi din. If I force someone to become a Muslim, he's not truly accepted by God because he was forced, he does not really believe, and I would be punished for forcing him to believe in something that he does not believe. In Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 19, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says, Man sha'a falyu'min wa man sha'a falyakfur. Whoever want to believe should believe, and whoever does not want to believe should believe. We'll all stand before our Almighty Creator and will answer individually. My mom and my dad and the country I was born in would not be there to protect me. God does not need to shift himself from being a monkey or an elephant head in India, or to be a tree that is being worshipped in South Africa, or to be some form of wind in Bolivia, for the local people to worship him as they like. People should seek God. The one mighty God is out there. You want to believe him, you'll be rewarded. You want to believe otherwise, you want to follow the convenience of mom and dad, then that's your problem. The second question, I don't know if I have time to answer it or not.
You can give it a try.
The second question about the marriage of Sayyidah Aisha, first of all, he married her, consummated the marriage when she was 9, as per her testimony. And I said in the last debate, there's no historical reference that she really knew how old she was. But again, at the time, not even the worst enemies of Prophet Muhammad, not only the Spencers of their time, anyone never criticized that. 2 reasons. Maybe that was the norm, and I couldn't care for that because if the Prophet said that this is okay, then it's okay for all time. Or she was much older than what she thought she was. Mind you, in America, 2011, in New Hampshire, the legal age of marriage is 13 years old. In Texas, it's 14 years old. It was a rural area 1,400 years ago. I think people should take a Prozac and get off the topic because it's meaningless. It is the Prophet of God. Her parents consented. She was happily married. She was one of the wisest women that ever lived. She narrated the 4th rank of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even if it was younger, even if she was older, it doesn't matter. It was accepted at the time. It's accepted all time for Muslim because that's the man who is our normative and our reference, not our prejudices in Midtown Manhattan.
Okay, Robert, you have 1 minute to respond if you'd like.
Thanks. As far as apostasy goes, here again, Mr. Zayed says, oh, no, it's just treason, and people were joining the opposing armies, and that's what it's all about. Well, actually, that's, of course, once again, not true. Apostasy is against the law in Islam, whether you join the opposing army or not. Muhammad said, if anybody changes his religion, kill him. This is something that is shared by all the schools of Islamic law as being a responsibility for the Muslims to kill those who leave Islam. Abdurrahman was a man in Afghanistan who converted from Islam to Christianity in 2005, and he was put on trial for his life. I trust you're going to give me more time since you gave Zayed more time. He was put on trial.
You got more time. You got more time.
He was put on trial for his life for leaving Islam. He didn't join the opposing army. He was put on trial for apostasy on the basis of Islamic law, and he's by no means the only one. As far as pedophilia goes, here again, the idea that Aisha didn't know how old she was is an insult to Muhammad and to Aisha, whom he supposedly praises, that they didn't know how to count and that they didn't know how to measure the sun's revolutions. That's ridiculous on the face of it. She knew how old she was. She was 9. It became, in the modern times, here again, like apostasy law, it becomes the norm. So that the Islamic Republic of Iran lowered the marriageable age of girls to 9 when Khomeini took power, because it was in imitation of the Prophet. And half the girls of 2nd grade age were married in Afghanistan when aid workers went into the refugee camps in 2003, and virtually all the girls older than that, in imitation of Muhammad. And so this is a problem that victimizes young girls, and it's done because of Muhammad, not because of Spencer, not because of some other Orientalist or so-called enemy of Islam, but because of Muhammad. And Zayed, instead of trying to fix it, is lying about it and demonizing and heaping hatred upon his opponents.
Okay, we've got more callers. We're going to go ahead and continue to move through here. Gentlemen, thank you so much for these answers here. I know we're giving you a little bit slack of time here, but we're going to continue with this next caller. And what is your question?
Yes, hi. My question is for Imam Sheikh, and actually I just want him to relax a little bit because he sounds and looks very tense. Okay, Mr. Imam, I do find that most of your statements are totally false, totally false. And I have a question for you. Okay, well, how come, or what is your proof? Do you have any solid proof that Muhammad was a prophet? He is an individual who came out of nowhere and said he was a prophet, held the sword to the people and killed them. And he had no prophecies and he had no witnesses. This is one thing. But the other thing related to women's rights, speaking Arabic being my first language and living in an Arabic culture for such a long time, can you tell us what happens to women's rights as mothers when they lose?
We need to move on. We're going to let him answer the question. We have to go on, please. Thank you. Mustafa, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I don't know what to say to that. Prophet Muhammad is the prophet of 1.6 billion people on the face of the planet. So you might, question yourself a little bit before asking that, I would say, rudimentary question. The Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslims, in it, the 1400 years ago, it tells exactly in pinpoint accuracy the development of a fetus in a woman's womb, exactly as if you're looking through an electronic microscope. How could an illiterate man in Arabia 1400 years ago know these details? The details of the Big Bang Theory is right there in Surah Al-Anbiya. You read Arabic, get an Arabic copy of the Quran and read Surah Al-Anbiya. That the root of every, or the source of every living thing is water. Not that water people drink it to be alive, but actually وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ in the Quran. The details of, that we didn't know till the advent of satellites, that the Romans were defeated by the Persians in the lowest point on earth, which is somewhere in the River Jordan. And when we had satellites, we discovered that actually it's the lowest point on earth. How did Prophet Muhammad know that? How did Prophet Muhammad in Surah Al-Dhariyat in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, and the skies we have built it with our powers and we are expanding it. And scientists would tell you now that actually the edges of the universe are still expanding of the original Big Bang. How did Prophet Muhammad ﷺ know that? The answer is he didn't. God, who sent him as a prophet, revealed it to him, and that's what Muhammad tells you. I do not speak of myself. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. More importantly, read the stories of the biblical prophets and how it was rectified from the alteration that happened on the hands of people. Why in the Quran that Moses is mentioned 131 times? Why Jesus, peace be upon him, is mentioned 25 times, while Prophet Muhammad is mentioned only 4 times? Because the entire body of prophets are the prophets of Islam, and he's the last prophet of God that brought the word of God complete and unaltered.
Okay, we're going to let Robert, if you'd like, we have a minute for you to respond to that answer.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the Quran, you can read those verses as the Imam Mustafa claims that they have all these scientific revelations in them, but they're all very forced interpretations. Actually, it's interesting to note also that Zulkarnain in Surah 18 of the Quran journeys to the edge of the world where he sees the sun setting in a muddy pool. And so I guess we're still waiting for the scientists to find that muddy pool where the sun sets and verify once again the wonderful scientific splendors of the Quran. Actually, there's nothing supernatural about the Quran or Islam at all. As a matter of fact, for 60 years after the Muslim conquests, the Arab conquests, I should say, from the 630s to the 690s, it's noteworthy that neither the Arab conquerors nor those people that they conquered ever mentioned the Quran or Islam or Muhammad. The conquered people called the conquerors Hagarenes or Saracens or Ishmaelites. They knew nothing about a holy book. They knew nothing about a prophet. They never said anything about Muhammad, and neither did the Muslims. It was only 6 decades after these conquests, supposedly, that happened in the name of Islam began, that we started hearing about this, and that's when it started to be invented. These things are historical myths. The only problem is, as the Imam Mustafa points out, 1.6 billion people do believe in them, or some number approaching that. And, I don't even care about that. He keeps calling me a hater and an enemy of Islam. This is all just part of his hateful agenda and his character assassination. But in reality, I couldn't care less what the Imam Mustafa wants to believe about God or what he wants to believe about Muhammad. It is none of my business. The only time when it becomes my business is when he and others of his like begin to commit violence in the name of his belief, begin to victimize innocent people who don't believe the way he does. And that's when it becomes a matter of human rights. And that's when I'm going to speak up. And anybody who's interested in justice and human rights, in the equality of rights of women with men, in the equality of rights of all people before the law, in the freedom of conscience, and the freedom of people like Abdul Rahman to change his religion if he wishes, that's when it becomes a matter for all free people to speak up. Otherwise, if he wants to leave us alone with his beliefs, that's just great. Right. And if he wants to believe the Quran is from God, that's just great. The problem is Muslims the world over are not doing that. They are victimizing Christians in Egypt, Christians in Iraq, Christians in Pakistan and Indonesia. They are on a relentless and genocidal jihad against Israel to destroy Israel utterly. And, you know, the Imam Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah has said it's a good thing the Jews are going to Israel, so we don't have to go and hunt them down all around the world, which betrays his genocidal agenda, which is rooted in Islamic anti-Semitism.
One of the hardest parts of this job is to stop people in their tracks when they're speaking. And I must interrupt at this point. We are finishing up here. We are very close to the end of our program. I do want to just thank you both for your passion and for your preparation in tonight's program. We're going to have to draw to a close here. I know there'll be certainly more debates, and there'll be more emails and more posts on various websites, and obviously more programs here at ABN. And thank you, audience, for viewing tonight and for listening and for calling, for commenting. And we are going to continue our ministry here, but we are going to finish our program for tonight. Again, we thank you, Moustafa Zayed, our Muslim apologist, and Robert Spencer, our Christian apologist, for speaking tonight on this topic: Islam guarantees women equality of rights with men. The debate will continue. Not just because our program is over doesn't mean that debate won't continue at this point. So we do want to thank you all for watching. Again, continue to watch us at our website, which is www.abnsat.com. Watch our programs as we upload them to YouTube. Continue to call us anytime at 248-416-1300. And we are also asking for your prayers. We covet them as we continue our ministry. God bless you, and thank you so much. Have a great weekend.